Hey, Dave Miller here with Leadership Pathway. Before we get into this conversation today, I wanted to let you know this is the second of seven conversations we're having on the 7 ingredients of leadership development for Gen Z. It's a chapter of our upcoming book, Who's the Next You, which will be out soon. In the meantime, I have made this available as a PDF. This chapter is available as a PDF. Be sure and grab it. I'll drop the link in the show notes. Today's session is on how to have a developmental conversation. How do we sit down across the desk, across the table, or how do we go on a walk and ask great questions and answer questions with questions and all the things that go into a great session together. Today's conversation is with Dan Rockwell. You definitely want to have something to take notes with. This is a keeper. I hope you enjoy it. Well, hello and welcome to the Leadership Pathway. I'm Dave Miller. I'm the co-founder of Leadership Pathway. And every month we bring a webinar of someone that we have stolen a bunch of material from, basically. And that's what this month is going to be. Leadership Pathway is all about helping primarily churches find and develop and keep young leaders, young emerging leaders. If you read the news at all, what's going on with Gen Z between the ages of 20 and 28 is amazing in this country. And the press is not only, it can be negative about this generation, but there's an undercurrent that's super positive of a spiritual awakening going on, and the churches and the organizations that we work with are reaping the benefit of that. But there's a problem, and the problem really is with us and how to onboard and help these young leaders move forward. And that's what we spend every day working on. And there's no better person I could introduce you to if you're watching this and you are passionate about how to help a 20 to 25-year-old on board in your organization, move forward, and still be there in 3, 5, even 7, 10 years later. I want to introduce you to Dan Rockwell. Dan, welcome to the Leadership Pathway.
It's a pleasure to be here, Dave. Thanks for the invitation.
We are, we're what's the word I should use? I don't use it lightly. We're blessed because Dan writes 5 days a week. I've been reading it for, I don't know, how long have you been blogging 5 days a week, Dan?
About 15 years.
50. So I found you probably a decade ago. And, you know, all of us, we subscribe to things, we read for a season, and then that content provider kind of wears us out and we unsubscribe. And so there are consistently 2 people that I read almost every day, and Dan is one of them. In our own materials, we link to his material on how to coach, how to mentor, how to manage, how to lead. We call them developmental conversations. We talk about coaching more than we talk about managing, but that's really Dan's heart. So if you go to LeadershipFreak.blog, is that correct? LeadershipFreak.blog. I keep it open. I keep his material. It's right on my desk. There's 2 things on my desk when I'm coaching. One is our little book about soft skills, and the other is a print off of how to do this. And let me read what I keep in front of me, Dan. How to begin and conclude developmental conversations. 10 questions to land powerful conversations. 5 results of powerful conversations. How to conclude. How to end, focused on next steps. It just goes on and on. When I'm stuck looking at someone on a Zoom and I don't know what to say, I look over and there's Dan's. It's like the top 10 things that I've gleaned from you over the years. So thank you for that. I want to start with, what made Dan Dan? I always want to start with, where were these people who we look up to and glean from between the ages of 20 and 25? Because that's where we focus our work. And I think what happens in that half decade kind of shapes where we're going. What were you doing? What was Dan Rockwell doing between the ages of 20 and 25?
I was in college, Bible college, actually, getting a theology degree. And then I became a youth pastor at a church outside of Philadelphia.
Okay. You're still in Pennsylvania?
I am still in Pennsylvania. We've traveled around a bit since, but
so is it the Eagles or the Steelers, Dan?
Eagles.
Okay. Is it the Phillies or the Pirates?
The Red Sox.
Might be some people that just turned this off. I don't know. How
Yeah.
long were you in vocational ministry?
Full time. I couldn't tell you. I've been in ministry all my life. I still am,
Yes.
and but a good part of that was bivocational.
Okay.
But I've been connected to the church world ever since I graduated from school and before.
Did you grow up in a religious home, Christian home?
No. My grandparents were Pentecostal.
Okay.
And I became a believer at 13 in a Pentecostal church.
Okay.
I went to church and Sunday school with my grandparents.
How about that?
And they owned a farm that we eventually bought.
Okay.
And so we lived up the street from them for a long time. And then they lived up the street from us. So basically we changed residence. And my dad, who is married to their daughter, so he was not part of the family, he was in-law, anyway, bought the farm. And one of the formative events of my life happened when I was going to church, and I was a little kid, probably 9-10 years old or whatever, and we're walking out, and the pastor is standing by the door, which is what they used to do, the glorification of the worm ceremony. And I don't know, maybe still, if I offended anybody, I apologize. But anyway, Ronnie Libby was the pastor of the church, and he was shaking hands, and he was just larger than life to a 9-year-old kid, Anyway, he shook my hand, and he looked at me, and he looked at my grandmother, and he said, Danny would make a great pastor someday.
Yeah.
Just the voice of a respected individual. And
you heard that. You heard him say that?
I heard him say it to her. And, I can't say that I thought of it a lot, immediately, the years immediately after. But as I think back on my life, that was a very important moment. Somebody believed in me.
Listen, there are no small churches.
Yeah.
They might be small in number. There may only be 50 people sitting in those. You never know who the 10-year-old or 12-year-old kids are within earshot of something. Yeah, it may not have changed your life that day, but I bet you came back to it at some point. It was one thing that led to another. And I think you talk to people who've been at this a long time doing something, and there's a moment like that. And we're always talking to the churches we work with, especially youth and kids pastors, right? And we're like, you got to get younger and younger. I don't know. These days we talk about how you got to have those I see this in you moments, right? I see in you something. I think we stole that from a preacher in Oklahoma. I see in you. And that's what was happening there. And when they're 10 or 12 or 13, I had one that I went back to time and again. And how did you come to start writing like you do? This what is it? 400 or 500 words every day. It's easily digestible. When people ask me what book are you reading? I'm like, don't read, just read the summary of the books, and get the leadership management books, but get a drip every day of this. When did you, what led you to do that?
Well, I was finishing my MBA, which I got late in life, and I realized I thought I was a great leader, and really I sucked at it, and that got me interested in it. Yeah. And I think the org development class in the MBA program really kind of turned me on. Yeah. And I realized also I was at a stage in life where I was having one of several midlife crises, and what that means is I think we ought to have a lot of them. You evaluate your life, you kind of look back and you say, and you come up with this conclusion, I think I have more in me. I think you know what I mean? So I had one of those experiences, and I was looking for a channel to have, do something different, do something more. And I was working at the local Penn State affiliate and handling adult ed and staff development, and had some computer labs, and technology was part of under my care. So I was pretty up on this. Was, hey, back in the day when Netscape was the browser, and we had classes on how to use it.
Yes.
Right. And I mean, I'm telling you. So anyway, I was into the technology to some degree. And so I made a commitment to myself to write 5 days a week, and or to write on leadership. And I did it for myself. And the whole thing I did for myself. And I was very fortunate that it got some traction with other people.
Well, I think your friend, I think it was Stan Endicott, when I was talking about launching this thing, leadership, we'll be 8 years old this summer, which is, those that are watching this that know me well, they know that's record breaking for me to stay at something for 8 years in my work history. Don't look at it. Don't look it up. He said, write 400 or 500 words every day. Just hang on to it, And I think I was reading you, and I started thinking about, what do I believe about the church and young leaders and my own journey and what I've seen. I had spent a decade running all over the country consulting with these places, and I had heard I always say I'm not Pew or Barna research, but I've interviewed a few thousand now at this point, and heard a few thousand stories, and been a little part of several hundred. And what do I believe about how people have these moments when they're 10, 12, 14 years old, how that develops through their life? What do they do between these ages of 20, how that shapes and where we go, and why do they quit? And I just started writing 400 or 500 words and tried to write it as a listicle. I didn't write 5 days a week like you. I'm not as generous as you. I'm not as smart as you, but I started writing. And those things became an ebook. It became a webinar. It became a book that's coming out this summer that we're excited about. I'm glad it took us 8 years to write it, because we would have said a lot of dumb stuff 6 years ago.
Well, don't look at it 10 years from now either.
I know, right? Or maybe a year. It's not going to age well, I don't think. But I'm so glad I did that. And I've started saying, when we hire, just this morning, a young coach who's coming on our team to slowly begin to learn. And he's like, what are you reading? I gave him your stuff. Here's the link every day. Read it. I said, but what are you writing? And I've started saying that to 23-year-olds because they're writing anyway. They're already doing it. And that's one of the big differences with this generation. They're not going to go out and work for 20 years and then think about a platform. They're doing it day one, right? Which is kind of funny to us.
Yes.
But I challenge him to start writing. Just start writing what you believe and see where it takes him. But so anyway, learn that from you.
That is, I tell you, Dave, that is fantastic. I got certified in teaching writing enriched courses when I worked at the college, because I did some teaching.
Okay. Sure.
And one of the things that probably the only thing I took from that was writing is thinking.
Yeah.
It's powerful idea. So what are you writing? I love that. Thanks for that.
Well, when I put it on Facebook last year, and of course, a bunch of 35 to 50-year-olds got angry. They're like, 20-year-olds shouldn't be writing. They were jealous. I don't know. Listen, so you've been a professor, a college employee. Would you call yourself a farmer?
Absolutely. I was brought up on a dairy farm, and that's what I still think of myself as, even though I do not want to do it.
Yeah. Farming. Well, there's a reason why Jesus, when he told stories, it was about sowing seeds and growth and weeds. There's a lot to be learned there on the farm. So professor, pastor, preacher, professor, youth pastor, farmer, writer, consultant, coach. What else?
Oh, that's I'm exhausted already.
Okay. Let's get into it. You've written, I was flying last night on your blog, and I think I went, if you go to Dan, LeadershipFreak.blog, you can search right on the front page, and I searched coaching or conversations, and I think there were 68 pages of blog posts about how to do this. Did you start there when you first started this idea of writing every day? Was it about how to manage? What was the original seed of thought in your mind, Dan?
It was not, there was very little original thought in my brain, and there was no strategy or scheme of things. And when you say like 6 pages, there are 6 blogs on each page.
Oh, I know.
68 pages. And
68
you say,
pages.
yeah,
No, that's what I mean.
There are 6 pages, and it's like, and you say that to me, and it's like, to me, it's like nuts. It's like, when you were reading those things, like 10 questions to land, and I'm thinking, I hope he doesn't ask me what the 10 questions are. I can't remember.
Yeah, I understand that. I get it. Here's what I think. I think these things, you write them. I do think God knows your address, and he knows the address of the people opening those emails. And he's in the clicks. I have to believe that. If not, I'm going to quit, right? But I think at the right moment, what you wrote at some point, maybe it was years ago, and you freshen it up and put it, and you deliver it, and someone opens that, that's exactly what they needed that day. Yeah. And if at their point of need, your words cross that, it happens to all of us.
It's wonderful.
It's wonderful. It really is.
Yesterday, I sent 2 days ago, I sent a 4-word message to a leader in Brazil. Yeah. And I got a message back shortly after. Your message made me cry. I heard the voice of God. Yeah. And it's like, all I said was, how are you feeling?
Right. Oh, wow. Yeah.
That's all I said.
It's powerful.
So you never know.
Okay. So how did you go from pastor, farmer to you eventually got into business consulting? Would you call it that? Consulting or coaching?
Not a lot. There's too much research involved in consulting for my taste. Coaching, training. Okay. I've worked with many organizations and work with them now. Some of them on how to develop a coaching culture. Yeah. Others, I coach their leaders, and sometimes I do training. We're setting up some training right now on, they wanted to call it communication training. And I said, I don't like that. Let's talk about how to have dynamic conversations. Oh, so we're going to have training on conversations, different kinds of, anyway, that's what I do. I'm not a consultant. That's too much research, too much work.
That's the endearing part of you. You're always deflecting that. Listen, what do you think the future of, I'm eventually going to get to our topic, I promise, but this is fascinating to me. The future of content, the future of books, even 400-word things, 500 word every day, the kinds of things that you do that are helpful. I have Chat GPT. I can ask it now. I've got one trained, right? And like I'm whatever my personality type is, I can put in Enneagram 3 talking to a 1 who's sad and disappointed, and it'll be like, and it'll give me 4 things I could ask them. Yes. And I've done it. I have done it. It has been a powerful, helpful tool in very specific instances I can think of. What's the future of content, do you think, when we have these crazy AI things? Are you in that world at all?
I am. And I think it's a great tool. It's fantastic. I'm a ChatGPT subscriber. I have Perplexity, which comes with us because of our internet company. And so I get the pro version of that. And I have Microsoft 365. So I have Copilot. Sometimes I'll ask all 3 of them the same question. Yeah. The future of content, I think, has to do with 2 things: wisdom and trust. There's a difference between information and wisdom, or knowledge and wisdom, and trust is just going to become more and more important. I'm on social media. I read this stuff. It takes me 15 minutes to verify whether this is actually real or somebody's making something up. It's just a waste of time almost. Yeah. If you're a trusted person, if you're consistent, and if you demonstrate wisdom, which is, I think, the ability to move information into action It's a behavioral, wisdom is a behavioral thing. It's not, it has very little to do with intellect and very little to do with knowledge, although both of those are part of it. A wise person is skillful at living and skillful at achieving their goals. A wise person is a person who is somehow putting information into action. So I think those things are going to become more and more valuable if we can somehow demonstrate that we are perhaps in those categories.
Well, you're writing every day. A lot of people are writing. Am I listening every day? That's a different question. Am I open every day? Is my point of need am I attuned? I think about that a lot. Your blog is not the word of God. I'm not pretending that it is, right? But I started reading the Bible finally. I mean, I majored in it, and I was in ministry for 15 years. I started finally reading it 7 years ago, Dan. It changed my life. And
there you go.
I get to it I get to it at least once a year. And it's weird how I can read it. I mean, even like the weird Old Testament stuff. And it's just like, I didn't know that was in there. Yeah. I've been through this thing 7 times now. And I think about it all day, and it changes me just a little bit every day. Wisdom. Yeah, that's good. That's a good point.
Whoever, to use the word inform instead of wisdom, I saw this quote: "Whoever informs you forms you," and I think that's a powerful idea.
Well, that tells me who I want to be informed by.
It helps, doesn't it? You know, whether it's whatever. Yeah, it helps for sure. We won't go there.
What's the difference? Question number 1. It took 31 minutes to get here. Question number 1. When you think about coaching or developmental conversations, what's the difference between that? Is there a difference? That and management, that versus mentorship. People will say, are you talking about mentoring? And we have what's your answer to, what's the difference between when you coaching conversations or mentoring or managing?
Yeah.
How do you divide that?
There's a key difference between the two, and it's the experience and expertise of the person who is doing it. A mentor has to have experience and expertise in a certain area. So I could mentor you on writing 300-word blogs 5 days a week. I certainly couldn't mentor you on many, many, many things. I have a fellow I'm coaching right now who, because of their organization had a substantial grant funding from the government that got turned off in a night, and they laid off like 60, 70 people. Yeah. Well, I can't mentor that person.
Right.
Through that. I've never experienced it. And I said to him, I'm so aware of my limitations sometimes I am giving him advice. Right. But of course I'm his coach and I'm his friend, and I can do that. So coaching is, I don't need to be an expert in your field to coach.
Yeah. So if we were lumping words on a board and we wrote coaching and we wrote mentoring at the top, you'd say advice. That goes over here with mentoring. If you're trying to connect words,
I think this mentoring is both coaching and mentoring are centered on the other person, but there is a little more in mentoring of my stories, my experience, my suggestions. Go try this, that kind of stuff. It's still, I think both the coach and the mentor. I don't like this idea, that we're trying to get, we're going to form somebody to be like us.
Right.
It's like the mentee is successful when he's like the mentor. No, the mentee needs to be like himself. But anyway, I think there is a little more in mentoring, a little more of personal stories and those kind of things. Not that I don't use them in coaching too.
Sure.
But, it may be a little more directive. Mentoring may be you may say, I see something in you that you don't see, and I'd like to take you a certain place. Of course, you need permission to do that.
Yeah.
It may be a little more directive too.
How do you know, you're several sessions in with someone. I don't know what your normal, how many conversations you're going to have when someone agrees and they keep showing up and you keep showing up, but then you hang up the Zoom or the whatever you're using, and you're like, is this being helpful? I can't even tell if this is being, how do you know? How do you know if it's being helpful or not?
It's a great question. I don't know if you can always know, although some clients are much more vocal. I had a couple conversations yesterday, and one of them, like probably 4 times, it was like, this was so, and we actually had a 50-minute session schedule, and we got done in 30 minutes. And it's like,
Yeah.
He said, Dan, I just have to tell you, you just helped me get ready for the next board meeting for his organization. You just, this was so useful. Thank you so much. So you get that. But I think the big word is energy. If they're energized, and if I hang up and I like have to walk around a while and release some of that energy, it's going in a good direction.
Okay.
Obviously, is there behavior change. Yeah. Are they clearly moving in the direction they want to go in?
Yeah. When you're coaching someone young, I'm going to say they're just getting going, right?
Yep.
Probably in the first 3 years of their professional whatever. Is your tone different? Do you think about they're just starting versus the 50-year-old exec? This is a rookie sort of young leader, manager, worker. Does your tone or your approach change with that person?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's way different. Okay. Way different for me. And this is probably where you get the blending of coaching and mentoring a little bit.
Right.
So with a younger person, I'm gonna pull out the sage card, I think, a little more.
Yeah.
And also, so I have adopted, I'll say I think this, and I use this both in coaching and in mentoring. I have adopted a way of seeing myself, and it has totally revolutionized me. So I fell upon this idea of identity-based leadership, and that's a different story, but how do you live out who you are?
Yeah. And
so I show up, who am I in a coaching or mentoring situation? I'm grandfather.
Yeah.
And that has given me permission to say things I never said. And here's a classic. We might have a coaching conversation, and it's a good coaching conversation. And at the end, I would say, hey, before we go, I just want to say something.
Yeah.
I just want you to know they are lucky to have you.
Oh, my goodness.
That's what Granddad says.
Oh, my goodness.
That's not what Maine boy, farm boy says. I don't say that kind of crap. You know what I'm saying? It's like too foofy. Yeah. But Granddad, and I don't tell, I've taught people that, show up. I've taught people about identity-based leadership, and they have different different ways of showing up.
Yeah.
But, to show up as a granddad with someone who is 23 and someone who is 50 is totally different experience.
When it's not going well, nobody's perfect, right? Nobody's perfect. In baseball, if you're pretty good about 28% of the time, you're going to make a good living. And in coaching, I don't know what the batting average is. Please don't look at the back of my card. When it's not going well, you're a few sessions in or something. And then most of our coaching is we're coaching the boss of the person we're really concerned about, right? So we're like through a leader into another person. But sometimes a pastor, I've got this person, I need help with this person. And they're young, right? And so it's directly, and there have been times I'm 3 sessions in and I hang up and I'm just like, I don't know if this is working. Yeah. What do you do? What do you do?
Yeah. I fired one client, and, client selection is, a big thing.
Yeah.
And because you want to meet their expectations and serve them well.
Yeah.
And I'm looking for aspiration when someone comes to me. I'm not, if you don't have aspiration, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So the price goes way up.
Aspiration. Oh, you're aspiring to something different.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's only 6:30 in the West. I mean, cut me a little slack, just a little slack. Okay.
I'm
so
sorry. Yeah.
They want to change, in other words.
They want to grow. They want to change. They want to learn. They have this openness to that. Yeah. My longest-term client is going to retire in a year and a half. I've been coaching him for years.
Yeah.
And he is the one that I said, we had a 30-minute conversation just yesterday, or the day just yesterday, I think it was. And he was so thankful for it. And he says, Dan, I'm going to go out. I'm going to go out being the best leader I can possibly be. And I'm telling you, he just fills me with fire.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. So they have to have aspiration.
Yep. So if I have fired one person.
Their boss says, please help me. This person does. I can't. They're going to lose their job if we stay on this. Maybe you're not. Are you in that situation very often? Well, I've been in it a couple times.
A couple times. It's always a red flag when someone calls me about someone else.
Yes.
I think they could really use this. No, I think you could really use it.
Yes. Thank you. If that sums up this. That sums up where we are most days.
Yeah.
We have senior or executive pastors say to us, we thought we hired you 3 years ago to help the intern.
Yeah.
But can we use your materials with everyone on the team? I'm like, please just photocopy. I mean, there's no greater compliment than you want the other 10 people or 4 people or 30 people to experience. It's not just for interns.
Yes.
But when it's not going well, okay, so they have aspiration. Let's pretend they do want to change.
Yes.
But you hang up and it's like, are they changing? I don't know. Am I helping or not? What do you do? What do you reach for?
Right. I usually don't waste our time. So I'm not going to, like I said, this only happened to me once. Mm-hmm. I have had a couple coaching engagements. Here's what happens. I get approached because someone thinks they need to learn how to do something.
Yeah.
What they don't realize is they need to learn how to be something. Mm-hmm. So the conversations start with the do, and as time goes by, they become the be.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose I can't think of too many, but there may be some who did not want to make that. I don't make it like, here we are, flip the switch.
Right.
But the conversations become much more about who you are and how you're showing up, and not the skill of leading a great meeting.
Yeah.
But anyway, I did fire a fellow. And then what I said was, I don't really feel like I'm being very effective here. I think you'd be better off with someone else.
Yeah.
And I thanked him, and then that was it.
Well, about 9 years ago, I hired a coach once. This guy wanted to coach, and so he was a buddy, and I'm like, well, I'll hire you. And so he sent me an agreement and a bill. I couldn't believe it, but I paid it and signed it, and we showed up. And he's like, okay, so what do you want to get out of this? And I said, I don't know. He goes, okay, well, it's been a great conversation. I'll see you next month at the same time, and you figure out what you want to get. And that he was, I probably was the first person he'd ever formally coached, right? He'd been a pastor for 15 years or something.
Yeah.
I've used that. I'm going to use that in an hour and a half with a person. First session today.
Yeah.
What do you want? What do you need? And if they can't verbalize, I learned that the hard way. And then I came back. It led to me quitting my job eventually, because that's really what he led me down a path that helped me realize I needed to move on to something else. And it was a game changer for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're hitting on something that I think is central to the success of a coaching engagement. And that is, what do you want?
Yeah.
And it can be a little slow.
Yeah.
Getting to that. So here's what I've learned about this. I don't know if it's okay if I mention, it's not really, you didn't ask about it. I just got excited about it.
Yeah.
Here's what I've learned. You ask people what they want, they tell you what they don't want. And you have to go around that tree a few times. And we learn what we want by kind of releasing or looking at what we don't want. And you have to let people do that, because a lot of us don't. It's just easy to know, I don't like this, I don't want that, I'm frustrated. All those things are fantastic, because you talk about young leaders. Young leaders can be angry, frustrated. They don't like the systems, and they don't like this, and I love it. I tell people, pour gas on their anger. Just like, I hear you, man. That's what's frustrating about. You can't believe, blah, 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 on and on. And so, you just let them go, let them get fired up. And then at a certain point, I'm going to say, what would you like to do about that?
Right. Dan, in our world, it's not the 50, 60-year-olds that are in our world. It's the 33-year-old who's like rolling their eyes, kids these days. Okay. And we're like, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of in this moment? Like, why wouldn't you just throw fuel on this person's? You're going to learn from them, right? Most leaders we work with were not developed. Would you agree? They weren't. They were developed maybe don't realize it yet in your 30s, like what you went through. But I mean, in terms of a supervisor sitting down and talking to them. I'm going to turn this off. Stop that. Supervisor or a coach or a mentor sitting down, intentionally having said, it did not happen for them. How do they learn how to coach?
Right. I think most of the, I don't know the number. Many managers are accidental managers. They got promoted, but they didn't get any training. And it's so unfortunate, because it just squanders their talent and frustrates the daylights out of them. Yeah. Because they're trying to do the best they can, and they're just doing dumb things and don't know it. And they wouldn't intentionally do them if they knew better. Right. So teaching, and I've taught a lot of people to be coaches and worked with organizations to have internal coaches are, it's great. Being the external coach, fantastic. Yeah, right. But the internal coach is a little different, and our special challenges. And I think the number one thing with training coaches is you don't try to fix people. Don't try to solve their problems. Because when you tell me I'm running, my meetings are terrible, everybody's falling asleep. I have 7 things to tell you right off the bat to answer your question. That's not coaching. Yeah. Right. You got to figure out you got to help someone figure out, what do you want? Yes. What does a great meeting look like? Describe it to me. Right now, what kind of leader produces that stuff? Right. Who do you need to become to have that, happening? Yeah. So that's, I forget your question now, but I know I want to say the biggest issue is fixing and solving. Yeah. Who cares what the question was? The answer was a lot better, Dan. The answer, I appreciate talking to people who just give a better answer than the question. So that was great. What about, what do you hear in the marketplace? You're coaching all over the world, I guess. I don't know. Right now, Australia, Canada, and US and South America. So it depends. If you're coaching in Australia, who's getting up at 3 a.m? That's the drag there, I guess. I meet him at 5, and he is up at 7, I think, or I forget the exact time, but he's up early, and I say to him, my day is over at 3. I don't know, but he's so awesome. He is so awesome. Anyway, what are you hearing from leaders out there in the marketplace about Gen Z? Good or bad? Well, it's probably bad, but there is, I think, a stigma that they're indulgent and they're lazy and they don't have any grit. Right. Enough said about that. Next, skip. Okay, 2 theories I want to run by you. One theory is, in my 20s, I don't know what you're 20 to 33. I got raises, advancements, and pats on the backs and attaboys, and with enough hindsight, and I think this is recent hindsight for me. I love getting old because you can look back and you see things, right? You didn't see a decade ago. I think in hindsight, it was my
It was the shadow side of Dave. How about that? That's what I was telling some leaders yesterday. I think my bosses and their bosses, all of this shining star of the team stuff, it looked like it was up and to the right for Dave. It was workaholism, daddy issues. It was the shadow side of me. You ever see that in, like, that person's working hard and it appears to be growth, but it really isn't growth. They're living out of something else. They're living out of something else other than, what would you say, other than the light, the positive side of these things that move us forward, the character development, the deeper things. You just live out of the surface. All of our personalities, we say there's a shadow side to everybody. There's an upside and there's a shadow side. There's an upside and a downside when you begin to understand yourself. What do you think about that?
Yes. Well, Jung, who, probably a lot of people wouldn't, Carl Jung would not, a lot of people would not espouse a lot of things he said. Right. I think he was, never mind. Anyway, he wrote this book, Man in Search of a Soul, and he talks about the shadow self. Okay. And it's interesting. I think in his work in that area in particular is interesting and useful. Yeah. The shadow self is the self you think everybody wants you to be. That's part of it. And Jung doesn't say that. It's my opinion. So I don't want to blame him for that. Yeah. The shadow self is the ego self that is trying to impress and trying to get applause and trying to earn praise. Yeah. And I think you're exactly right, Dave. And it's in all of us. And one of the gifts of coaching is to give people a moment to reflect on who they really are versus who they are trying to be or who they think they're supposed to be. And that pressure, a young leader has a lot of pressure. They put a lot of pressure on themselves to, well, I have to do this. I have to be like this. And that part of that is good because they're wanting to make their mark. And frankly, you need to make your mark if you're going to advance. You need to somehow contribute. So, but we lose ourselves in all of that. Yeah. And the rediscovery of self, coaching can be very useful in that regard. I'll give you one quick story on this, Dave. First time I mentioned to you before, I talk to leaders about identity-based leadership. In other words, you got to lead. Leadership is becoming who you are. Yeah. That's a Warren Bennis quote, right? Yep. And Francis Hesselbein said, leadership is a matter of how to be, not how to do. So these are, just things that drive me crazy. I hear that the first time, like 10 years, 11 years ago, nuts. It's crazy. Anyway, I got a call. Actually, this fellow was a pastor and a great guy out in Las Vegas. And I got a call saying, Dan, I'm at the end of my rope. And I ended up out in Vegas and spent a day with this guy. And it was kind of dark, to tell you the truth. Yeah. And we had dinner that night with his wife. And during the conversation, he just went bright. It was the first time I saw it. And I said to him, what's going on for you? So we're sitting there at dinner and we're going to have a coaching moment. What's going on for you? And he said, Dan, I love being a dad. This guy had raised 4 kids and they adopted 4 small minority children. Now, to me, that sounds like punishment. For him, it was bliss. Right. So we talked about it a minute. And then I said this to him. And this is when I started really getting a grip on identity-based leadership. Let me ask you this question, I said. If you showed up tomorrow and you took off your leader hat and you put your dad hat on, what would be different for you? And I said, and obviously, you're not going to walk in saying daddy's home and nobody's going to know this. It's just you. You're just showing up and you're thinking, Dad, what does dad say? What does dad do? How does dad respond? What's shocked me is when I asked him that question, what would be different for you? He said, I would hold people more accountable. I thought he was going to say, I would hug people, whatever. And I said, here's the deal. He's at the end of his rope because he's doing everybody's job for them. Right. But at home, he says, when I tell the kids, the lawn's got to be mowed before dinner. We don't have dinner until the lawn's mowed.
Yeah.
So it was a moment for him. And he actually is so funny. He texted me. This was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And then the text would be maybe even a year ago now. He was in South Africa with somebody, and he texted me this picture of himself. And he said, Dan, the most important thing I ever learned about leadership is what we learned together and how you show up, to be that person. And it changed his life. And that has affected me a lot too.
Yeah. That's so great. We are in the church business, mainly church leader business over here. And even big churches are small companies, right? When I talk to a 27-year-old who onboarded at a major company, thousands of employees, right? Big place. And they have in-house development people and in-house training, and the onboarding process is screwed down tight, and they take you through it. Maybe I'm making it sound better than it is because I've never worked at a place like that. I've been over here, but onboarding, development, management, if you can stand it, if you can stand being in those things, it appears to be the slow drip process that produces something a little more, not better, it's the wrong word, predictable. How about that? That's maybe the underside of those things. Over here in church world or small business world, fewer than 50 or 60 or 100 employees, you're lucky to have one HR person that's real, let alone 2 or 3 or 5 or an in-house development plan, a place to go when you need help or management. And church leaders, of which I am one, we go to these conferences and we listen to Fortune 50 people talk and buy their book, and it's like we're working for SpaceX or Tesla or IBM or pick one, Apple. We always quote, what's his name from Apple? Yeah. And then we come back home, but we're working at Bud's Muffler Shop, Dan. Half of us have the same last name. Dad's in charge. Mom's there as the secretary. The cousins, and we know when he goes like that, we know what that means organizationally. Nothing's written down. There's very little written down. There's very little process. And then we throw an outsider into that. So let's say great church. There's 10 people. They can no longer fit in a minivan. When I start these workshops, I'm like, who here works at a place you still fit in a sedan? How about a full size? Who's beyond the full size van? That's a big church. That's a couple thousand people, right? HR there is done by the person who's detail oriented that reads. They couldn't do people stuff, and so they're doing HR. There's very little, and how we develop these people, how they get developed or not developed. They say to me things like, here I'm coming through the window, and they say, I want to develop leaders like Jesus did. Okay. I want to develop leaders like Paul did. Okay. So we start using those examples, but it dawns on me, if you want to do that, we talked about AI earlier, get rid of that. You got to really throw your car away and just start walking everywhere. Can you imagine how centered and how healthy we'd all be if my manager just said, hey, we're going to go 5 miles that way and have a revival or something. We're going to do some ministry. We're going to care for some people 5 miles that way. We got to be there at noon. So let's start it. What time would we start? A long time. Yes. Because we got to stop and eat and find something. And you would be developed, wouldn't you? Yeah. And it's getting small business people. The difference between small business and big, like there's no one there whose job it is to make sure we're growing, right? We get hired. I just told my own story. We get hired because we can get some stuff done. And what do we do in churches, nonprofits, probably any small business? We take on more than we should. Our calendar is packed. All the consultants teach us how to be more and more efficient. How do we get more and more done? We're moving too fast, and then someone hands us someone to manage or lead, or an intern or a resident is what we call them. And they got to sit down and look them in the eye. Is there a difference, from your perspective and your experiences, right? small business to what you might large company. I don't know technically. Is there a definition? More than 100. It feels like at about 80 employees, the one for-profit at about the 80th hire, they started bringing leadership development in-house, more than one HR kind of person, right?
Yeah.
They start doing more than just benefits and payroll. They start thinking about, from the janitor to the CEO, what's the path of growth here? There's a few dozen churches that big in America. The great majority of us, and I would say a lot of people, we work at Bud's Muffler Shop. What's been your experience? The difference between small business managers and big business?
Yeah, I have worked with leaders who have 65 employees, 100 employees, and I've worked with Chick-fil-A and Home Depot, and there is a different feel and attitude. And I think the biggest, if you're talking about a young person coming into a smaller situation, I think the biggest challenge that organization faces is overcoming this restriction of the leader who holds everybody back. They don't mean to, but they do, and that's a big one.
Dan, I think of who I was leading, mainly age 24 to 34. There are people that are still doing it, and I'm proud of that. That would be now 30 years later. But I don't think I never woke up on a Monday thinking, what am I going to intentionally do this week to help Curtis or Christy or Justin or Bart or who else? Who else was in that room with me in those days? What am I going to do to help them grow? I think my hair was on fire. They kept up because of their own, maybe it was shadow to them. I don't know.
Yeah.
And they succeeded. They succeeded. Maybe my boss looked at that and said, Dave's a great manager leader. I don't know, man. I think there's a there in church world in particular, like where we are, to speak a little higher up, like our best thinking has brought us to this point. Maybe that's in our world. Who's going into ministry? Are they still there 18 months later? I think every business sector has this issue: plumbers and electricians and school bus drivers and teachers and nurses and doctors, and mainly service finance. I was reading this week, Gen Z's getting fired faster in finance than ever. Like, these people go into these amazing jobs and their bosses, they can't do. There's a there versus if you happen to be at a place that's a little bigger. When I'm talking to a great church, a great church with let's say 6 employees, church of 500. And they'll say to me, I was reading the Chick-fil-A book or the Apple book or the memoir and I think to myself, you need to read, is there a book by Bud? I often think that. How did Bud go from one location to 2?
Yeah.
That I don't know that exists out there, but I wonder if there's something we could learn from just small business people who have what appears to be something where people want to keep working there. They stay, they grow, they move forward.
Yeah. Well, I think in the small, what comes to mind for me as you say this, Dave, is I think, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the smaller situation where the leader's been there quite a while, has a lot of influence, has made a lot of decisions, they just need to get stupid and stop being so smart. They just need to get stupid and I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah.
Something that comes to mind here. I read a great book, Orbiting the Giant Hairball. His last name is McKinsey. You know that book. Yeah. And toward his end of his career at Hallmark, he had this title or something, but he didn't have any job description. He had an office, and people would come to him with their ideas because he was Mr. Creative.
Yeah.
And they would come to him with their ideas, and he did that for a year and a half or so. And I think that's my memory. And he said, I always told him all the same thing. I never said anything different. That is a great idea. Go do that. They thought I was a genius. So you just need to get stupid for a while, because none of us know as much as we think we know. And I'm going to hear something from somebody, and it's like, if that doesn't feel right or that doesn't sound right, I don't need to answer it. I need to lean into it. I need to say, talk to me a little bit more.
We get afraid though, Dan.
Yeah.
Why do we get afraid to do that?
Yeah.
Leaders where I'm in bed, we're so afraid of young people screwing something up. And I remind us all often, like, let's go back at the last decade. Who's brought shame to the church publicly in spectacular ways?
Yeah.
It's me and my peers and people that are older. The 23-year-old that messes up, they don't make the rounds and the blogs and the things. They don't have podcasts. It's the 50-year-old.
Yeah.
Why are we afraid? And we have an opportunity with this generation, I would say, especially this generation. They show up empowered. They show up creative.
Yeah.
If we can tap that, right? The number one opportunity they have is to really not do anything. We've had young ministry candidates say to us, well, if I don't wind up in youth ministry, I'll just fall back on my Instagram and I'll monetize that. I mean, I just showed up and gritted my teeth and put up with my boss when I started working.
Exactly.
Because that's what my dad did. I don't think my dad ever even told me that. I just think there was this assumption in the 90s. That's when I jumped into work out of college. You showed up and you saluted and you just kept coming back. Today, they sit and if their boss is not leaned in going, that's a great idea. No, their boss is like, get in line, stay in your box.
Yep.
Who told you could ask that question in this meeting? I was here a decade before I spoke up. I mean, and we're talking in churches.
Yeah.
We're talking in churches. This is what we're dealing with. And I'm like, why would you not tap that curiosity that they have?
Yeah.
Maybe they have a view of something that you don't have. We got to figure that out in small businesses and in churches. We got to figure that out because they're up on there is no third floor where the developmental people live in these clients that we have. There's 10 employees maybe, and they're all super busy and they're great people. These are my heroes. They're faithfully still there, right? All of us doing we're a bunch of quitters. I told them that yesterday in this workshop. Like, you guys are the ones still there doing it. But this has to change. We're killing ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. You made me think, Dave, about the importance of letting people fail. And Amy Edmondson's work these days, her latest book is, I think, Being Wrong in the Right Way. Her work is about psychological safety, and that's a terrible term. It's ridiculous, but her latest work, I think, I haven't read it yet, but letting people fail in small ways and learn is so much better than protecting people from it's the ego is trying to prevent and make sure nobody fails and nobody struggles. But the best thing you can do for somebody is to let them go out and work on something in a small way and then let them learn. And you, as a coach, you give them this opportunity. They come in for a conversation with you, and one of the things you say is, well, what are you learning? What's working? What's not working? What do you want to do next? And if they say they're going to continue doing the same thing, say, well, that's a great idea, but let's think of something else.
Well, the way your tone changes when you say that, like I can tell you've said that before because you're like, And then you say it in like this warm,
Yeah.
inviting sort of tone. How many times do we? And I saw this. Was this recent, or did I dig this out? Ways to not start a one-on-one. Okay, I've only got. I know it's in your calendar for an hour. I got an airplane in 45 minutes. So, and it's just like even in that, this is supposed to be the weekly hour where the tone changes. We slow down enough to listen, but we started in the wrong way. This generation in particular, authenticity and these things that just rule this generation. Yes. It's more important than what we're doing. Do I work at a church or a casino? It doesn't matter. Does my boss love me and want the best for? Really?
Absolutely.
You ask at 20, and people my age are like, well, I want them to be called. And they need to be called to be on my team. And I'm like, well, can you remember being 22? Do you remember? Were you called? Did you know you were going to be where you are today 30 years ago? I don't think so. So how do we create an environment? The tone of how you ask that question? It's everything.
It's so powerful because when you made me think about, when I was 22, 23, I became a youth pastor, and I wanted to change the world. Yeah. Well, don't rein me in. And right. So I worked at smaller churches. Mm-hmm. When I say smaller, 150 or so, I guess. Sure. And we sometimes had as many teens as adults in some events, but I wanted to change the world, and those guys didn't stop me from doing it. And so we did a lot of wacky things. I went to a big church who had visitation. They had Thursday night visitation. And so the teens come and I would go out with them on visitation. I said, this sucks. This doesn't work. This is terrible. So I said, we're going bowling. Go get your friends. And we're going bowling. And so our visitation was go get your friends and go bowling.
Oh, yeah.
It was fantastic.
Sure.
Oh, did I get in trouble for that? You thought I would have come out of the pits of hell.
Dan, you would think times have changed. You would think with all the tsunami of content of the last, 30, 40 years of how to lead. We started right. When did this world begin? This cottage industry. I don't know. It was 92 for me, the first time. And then I started reading Warren Bennis and Max Dupree, John Maxwell, these kind of those, to me, that's the early stuff. I don't know. Was that early? I don't even know.
I think the Drucker was probably before that, but that's early.
Yeah, Peter Drucker. You would think 30 or 40 years later, we would know. Yeah. We would have, why does that still go on today? One thing when you said we had as many teens as adults, in my mind immediately I thought, well, that doesn't work.
No, right.
We know why that doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The walls are marked up. The chocolate sauce is in the carpet.
Oh, we did. Oh my goodness. I have to tell you, you're going to love this, Dave. So the first church I went to was outside of Philadelphia. Yeah. And we made an indoor miniature golf course in the church using the registers as holes so you can imagine how unsanctified that is. Oh my word.
Man, what's a register? Oh, you mean
where the air comes up through. Yeah. Forced air. It had these things in the floor.
Oh, my father just cringed. If he doesn't even know what I do for a living, but he was an HVAC guy. He'd be like,
what are you supposed to call that? Air vent?
You're putting golf balls down the.
Well, we're catching them, but we turned the whole, the church and down the steps and
right.
We did miniature golf.
That's fun. Our youth pastor, I was telling this story yesterday. He put chocolate sauce in squirt guns in the building. Now right before they started, he's like, wait. Let's get some trash bags, and he put maybe 3 trash, thinking that would help. No, man, those super soaker pump water guns were shooting chocolate sauce 30 feet. No. That didn't go over well.
No, probably not.
More teens than adults, though.
Yeah.
More teens than adults. That doesn't work. We've got to find ways. We got to find a way to throw fuel on that. You said that earlier. We got to throw fuel on these questions, throw fuel on these innovative ideas like bowling, innovation, bowling instead of visitation. It's great. Final thoughts. Maybe there's someone listening to this, Dan, that they're just like, yeah, he's right. What should I do? You're talking to church leaders. Give us one final Dan Rockwell thing.
Well, the thing that has changed my life the most, I think, is letting people in. And I was very slow at doing that because I knew so much.
Yeah.
But when someone shows up at your door, invite them in. When they're weirdos, when there's something you don't like about them. The people, I am who I am today. Because people reached out to me, and because I'm a maniac, very reluctant. We're stoics up there in New England, very reluctant to let people in.
Yeah.
The person who taught me how to coach and who is my coach, and I coach him today and mentored me, and we have trained together since, reached out to me one day, and he said, Dan, have you ever thought about having a coach? And I said, nah, that's ridiculous, because I knew everything.
Right.
And he was so humble. This is one of the top rated coaches in Canada. And he was so humble. And every now and again, he'd reach out and say, hey, let's have a coach. We had one, and it changed my life. I couldn't believe it. It was like there was somebody who was in it for me, who didn't need to get something from me, who was in it for me. And it just totally invigorated me. And he changed my life.
Yeah.
So you got to let people in.
And they're sitting one cubicle over in this world. They're down the hall.
You're exactly right. Yeah. There are people and fringe people in any organization who are dying for a chance.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
I often remind the super old 33-year-old veteran leader. That's what we call him. The veteran 33. There's a 22-year-old. They'll tell me, all of them who are still in it, right? They faithfully are still in it a decade later. And they talk about the early years and the struggles and sitting in the back of the room or being in the back of the van, and the overpaid consultant comes to town, and they'll tell stories like I was saying that. And then they hired an outsider. That joker came in. And
yeah.
I'm like, well, don't forget, I bet down the hall from you, there is a 22-year-old, and you're probably trying to lead them or manage them. They're the next version of you. So how do you get inquisitive about that? But it's tough to break those cycles. It is tough. I feel like we could, how long will this keep recording? I don't know. But Dan Rockwell, when I think of people who are generous, I think of you, I think of your writing, and who am I to challenge you, right? You have to find the punks that are just started an agency that'll come set the lights and the microphones up. You don't have to think about it. You just get on there and start talking. You talk for 20 minutes because the writing is awesome every day. Looking at you and hearing the tone of your voice, you got to capture that. It'll cost you money. You'll have to pay him something. I don't know. But there's smart people that'll just like record it and then take it away, and then you're everywhere and they're blasting it, and then we can all go listen to this while we're on our Peloton bike or something like that. And that would be a gift. You spend some money on that. Yeah. Or get somebody else to pay for it. You could do that. It's brought to you by Kraft, whatever. Chick-fil-A brings you Dan Rockwell. That would be a gift. Yeah. So Dan Rockwell, LeadershipFreak.blog. If you're not getting that daily email and you're trying to lead or coach people, you are missing one of the true tools that you can use every day. And so I would implore you to go get it. This topic of how to do this, how to coach, how to have developmental conversations is our book. Our book is coming out. If we could ever get it, done and printed, we've got a whole chapter on this about how to launch residency in your organization. It's what we call it, a calculated, somewhat predictable system to develop leaders, and it rises and falls on your people's ability to learn how to have a developmental conversation. But honestly, if you've only got $20, don't buy that. Don't buy our book. Just buy The Vagrant by Dan. You'll find it on his blog. And his stuff is free. It's free and it's every day. So thank you for being here, Dan.
Thank you for inviting me.
Conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's do it again.
All right.
Take care.